It's like somebody took the smoldering remains of what was in the dumpster and just put more stuff in it to reignite it for 2026.
Yeah.
Welcome to Wait What? Sportsbiz Chat with DP and McGhee, the podcast where we take a sometimes irreverent, sometimes cynical, and yes, even a sometimes serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, Tim McGhee.
And I'm David Parro.
David, I don't know if it's the second cup of tea I've had this morning, or as my daughter refers to it, caffeine for wimps, or whether it's the new year and the first episode, but I'm super pumped. So what's on your mind?
Well, that's good to hear. Man, I knew I liked your daughter when I met her. That's a great, I like that line. There's a couple different places to start. And this is what we officially consider our prediction day. First episode of the year. This happens to be season 5. So thank you all out there for hanging with us, or letting us hang with you, I guess.
2 more seasons and we will have caught up to Lost.
Yeah. I don't think we can start the show without referencing a prediction that was not part of our predictions last year, but was something that we predicted quite a bit over the last few episodes, and that is changes at NASCAR with the announcement that Commissioner Steve Phelps has submitted his resignation. I think we both believed coming after during the trial and some of the discovery that happened in the trial, and then of course post-trial, that his days might be numbered in one way or another, and that came out just yesterday. So whether one of us was going to make that in a prediction or not, I don't know, because we're going to be getting that later in the show. But huge news, and you and I both know Steve and have worked with him. I'm a big fan. I thought he did great things there. But given everything that came out, particularly when you have the CEO of Bass Pro Shops, a big sponsor with RCR, coming out after that text exchange with Steve O'Donnell, where Steve Phelps was criticizing Richard Childress in pretty direct terms, that was going to be a tough one to get through, particularly with the way that fan base is. I'm sure it was a nice, easy, mutual decision to make, but I will say congratulations to Steve on his tenure there. I thought a lot of good things happened for NASCAR during his time.
Yeah, I didn't expect it to happen this quickly, but I guess, going into the new season was as good a time as any. He had a great run there, 20 years, first ever commissioner of the sport, but I do think a cautionary tale. Just assume that at some point your emails will be read by people who were not intended to read them. His comments, as you mentioned, about Richard in particular, I found personally offensive. But let me just say, I don't think you judge somebody's entire career or life by what they do in their worst or bad moments. You look at what they've done over their career. So he's 63 years old. Don't know if he's going to ride off into the sunset or do something else. I think he could probably contribute a lot to an organization, whether it's in motorsports or outside. But I do think his position was somewhat untenable given his comments.
One big question, of course, is what do they do with that position? As you just pointed out, he was the first commissioner, and he was elevated from the president title, and then they moved Steve O'Donnell into that president role. Of course, Jim France still maintains the overall, head of the organization as the top person in the family, with Lisa France Kennedy, of course, still being very involved. And then Lisa's son, Ben, somewhat waiting in the wings, but as our past guest Adam Stern pointed out, maybe not ready for that. So I think a big question will be what happens to Steve O'Donnell, because he was really Steve Phelps' right hand, I would say, and whether they elevate that or they go back to their old organization anyway. So I think that'll be a very, very interesting story for us to be staying on top of.
Yeah, it's an important year for NASCAR. If for no other reason, one of the results of that lawsuit settlement was the fact that these charters have increased dramatically in value, and so owners, not that they weren't protective of their investments before, have even more reason to want to make sure that the organization NASCAR is run in such a way as to protect and hopefully lead to increases in the future of those charters. So.
Yep.
Yeah, it's an important time for the sport.
By the way, we are going to do our review of our last year's predictions here at the end of this opening segment. But what's big on your mind?
Well, something we haven't talked about in quite some time, but we used to talk about it quite often, was LIV Golf. Big news over the holidays that Brooks Koepka announced that he is leaving LIV Golf, including his part ownership in one of the teams a year before the end of his contract. No announcement that he's intending to go back to PGA Tour. The reason that was given in the press release was that he wanted to spend more time with his family, which is sort of the go-to, followed closely by difference in philosophy. But that's big news. He's one of the best and biggest names in LIV Golf. And shortly after that announcement, Bryson DeChambeau, who's never afraid of a microphone or a pen and pad in front of him, said that he was considering doing the same thing. And then, these are rumors. I am not claiming in any way, shape, or form that they're true, but I read that there's some concerns about the financial situation of LIV Golf as well, which is somewhat interesting given who their investor and owner is, the sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia. But like any wealth fund, it's concerned with returns on investment. So I think this is a big year for LIV Golf.
So LIV gets launched. They make a lot of these big moves with getting players, starting with Phil and et cetera. And then when they got Jon Rahm, it was a big dart thrown back out, which they, I think, did after agreeing with the PGA Tour that they were going to, PIF was going to go into business basically with them. And then the Strategic Sports Group came along, and that kind of, shuttered that for a little bit. And it seems as though the PGA Tour is moving along quite well, without worrying about what is happening now at LIV. And I think PIF's feeling was that they just, as I've always said, they wanted the biggest seat at the table in the sport of golf that they could, and now they have LIV, right? While Scott O'Neill, I think, is making some interesting moves, and he's a better face person for this league than Greg Norman could have ever imagined being, without names like Brooks Koepka and DeChambeau, who seems DeChambeau seems like he's totally the face of the sport right now. And if he's thinking of leaving, then it's even a worse situation. But he seems to kind of buy into it for the most part, other than the fact that he wants to be considered with the greats and he wants to play more with the greats. And I do think he's at the prime of his career and should be playing with the greats. So that's the downside. But the PGA Tour doesn't seem to be in any rush to say, we got to settle this thing. This thing's problematic for us, as it was for a while.
So what's interesting is when LIV Golf first started, the conventional wisdom was that the PGA Tour had a lot more to worry about than LIV had to worry about with the PGA Tour. I would argue that has flipped, 180 degrees. PGA Tour has done quite well, continued to grow since LIV Golf. LIV Golf has, by all accounts, people are really happy with Scott O'Neill's performance as the new CEO. They've made some changes. They've gone to 72 holes in hopes of getting world golf rankings. So far, that has not come to fruition. But I think, we're in a situation now where, I don't think PGA Tour has anything to worry about. They could create a very similar type event or structure within the ecosystem of PGA Tour golf with team events and so forth. They're talking about shortening their season. They could work it in on the either end of the season or take a break in the middle. There's any number of ways they can do it. So, we'll continue to watch the interplay between LIV Golf and the PGA Tour. But if I were a betting man, I'd rather be sitting in Brian Rolap's seat than Scott O'Neill's right now.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think at this point it's whether or not if they don't have the players, and these players that with their deals, their initial deals coming up, how much are they going to extend? They got players because of the exorbitant amount of money that they were willing to pay these players. Mm-hmm. And if that isn't there, what's the draw? Because there's no other reason to do it, especially as as the PGA Tour, largely because of the LIV forming and them having to react, and they did react because of what was happening at LIV. They have made some situations better for younger players, created some special events, but it's with Brian Rolap there, and now with Tiger playing somewhat of this role with leadership there at the tour. Continued changes are going to be made, I think, to make it the preeminent tour, and they seem to have more of the financial wherewithal than they did, given the investment that they've taken in. That doesn't include, at least to this point, the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. We usually hit this at the beginning of the year, and that's where we are, of course. Once again, of the top 100 shows, live shows, broadcast on American television. We should say that. We have to say that because of the global nature of this show. 96 of those, of the 100 largest audiences, were sports events. Now, that's great, and it speaks to the viability of the sports industry and that it's one of the few things that people do have to watch live, and the importance of it, and that, of course, fuels the advertising dollars, the rights fees, and all of those other things. Of that 96, 92 of them were either NFL or college football, which is pretty amazing. Now, 2 World Series games made it on there, as did the men's NCAA final. Previous year, the women's final had gotten into the women's semi maybe had gotten into the top 100, and the Kentucky Derby. Now, trivia question. Name as many of the other 4 that.
And these are live broadcasts. So
these are live broadcasts.
So K-pop Demon Hunters would not be.
No.
Heated Rivalry would not be eligible for this list.
By the way, I have to tell you, have you listened to any K-pop Demon Hunters music?
No.
As my daughter Jill likes to say, it just freaking slaps.
It slaps. Okay.
It's great music, and my grandkids absolutely love it. So it's actually
okay.
Quite catchy.
All right. So 4 live broadcasts. All right. So the Oscars.
The Oscars is one. Yes.
The Grammys.
No.
The Grammys is not.
Just something that happened. It doesn't have to be like a special.
Yeah, the inauguration.
The inauguration was one.
All right, so I got 2. That's all I got.
Well, another one's a political one.
The debate between.
No, there wasn't one in.
A political one.
Yeah.
What was that?
Well, it wasn't an official State of the Union because you don't have a State of the Union in your first year. So it was the speech to the joint sessions.
Okay.
And then the other was it's a local thing, a local holiday thing, meaning New York centric.
St. Patrick's Day parade?
That'd be good.
4th of July fireworks.
Macy's.
Oh, thanks.
Macy's Thanksgiving.
Okay.
So.
Okay. All right. Well, I got 2. It's not bad.
Yeah, it's pretty good, man. Pretty good. Good job. Anything else you want to talk before we jump into a review of our predictions?
No, we're good. I think we're good.
Okay, so last year we made our predictions as we normally do, and we like to grade ourselves and make sure that we did okay. I have a sheet here, so I'll just kind of go through them and we can comment on it. But I do want to. I gave my Naismith Award because, of course, my co-host is the chair of the Naismith Committee, and it's very awesome that he is. And he can't give his prediction, so I do. So last year I went with Cooper Flagg as the men's player of the year. I got that right. I went with Hannah Hidalgo as the women's player. I was wrong on that. It was Juju Watkins from SC.
Hannah Hidalgo was a finalist, though. So.
Well, I hope I'm not going to be like picking anyone that didn't end up as a finalist. That would be pretty weak. I went with Bruce Pearl from Auburn. That was wrong. Rick Pitino from St. John's got it. But
Bruce Pearl did win the AP Coach of the Year, or he won a Coach of the Year award, and then shortly thereafter resigned and retired.
Well, unfortunately, I can't make the AP pick because you're my co-host, and we go that way.
No, I'm just saying you get partial credit.
Yeah, I picked Corey Close from UCLA as the women's coach of the year, and I got that one right.
Yes.
Your first prediction was the most right prediction ever made, because we had to keep going back to it, was that some sort of betting scandal involving a major sports league was going to happen. And I think you were right on that, and at least two counts. So congrats on that. Because of course we had the major issue going on with the NBA and various players or people associated with the sport, including a current head coach, involved, and then the baseball one pretty much right after that. And those are just the two big ones that pop into my head right away.
Yeah, and that, we'll get to our predictions for next year, but I have one related to that.
So my next one was that NBA would announce expansion, I guessed and assumed that it was going to be Seattle and Vegas. I think I wasn't the only person thinking about that. I didn't think that was that bold, but they didn't make an announcement. Adam Silver seems to be waiting for another time. I expect it'll be this year, but I'm not going to make that prediction this year. That would be lame. So I was wrong on the announcement, that the announcement would be made in 2025. You had one of the greatest all-time predictions last year, I thought, in that you predicted that the SEC would get 13 teams in the NCAA tournament. You were wrong on that because there were 14 teams, but I'm going to make it, that's a right call, of course. But you went further to say that if a team would not make or to not cut down the nets, that's the way you described it.
Yeah.
And University of Florida did cut down the nets.
I was wrong about that.
It was a great prediction, though.
It was a great Final Four.
Yes.
But what's interesting is of the four Final Four teams, Florida is not in the top 25 as we sit right now. They lost some key players, and including Walter Clayton Jr., but they're not in the top 25. Duke, I think, is number 7. Houston's in the top 10. So anyway,
it's interesting because it speaks to the movement of players and how quickly another team can kind of jump back up, and how one team, if it doesn't doesn't reload, say, can drop.
Which and you know me, and you know that I am a Carolina fan, true and true. But boy, what Jon Scheyer has done there after losing his 3 top players last year to the NBA draft. Yep. 2 of whom, Koepka and Flagg, having great rookie seasons, and to reload like that with the Boozer twins, and they're the top 10 team again. That's pretty good coaching.
Yes, it is. My next one was that Netflix will continue to get stronger in live sports, pursue NFL international games, and get the new UFC deal. And that was the main part of why I'm wrong on that, unfortunately, because Paramount Plus got that massive 7-year deal with UFC. Netflix did get the NFL Christmas games, but they didn't get Formula One, which I had been thinking that would be the case because that went to Apple. So I was overall wrong on that pick, that Netflix didn't make the moves that I expected it to. Your last one was that the college football playoffs will announce their expansion in 2025 for the 2026-27 seasons to 14 or 16 games. That did not happen. It was close, and I expect it's going to happen in a couple of weeks. So maybe you were just off by that.
I'm doubling down on not to.
Okay, that's fine. So I think that's a good hold. It just didn't happen in 2025, which is what your prediction was.
Yep.
So overall, I didn't do as great as I had hoped. I really didn't. I didn't do well. And I didn't think I was going all that far out on a limb either, but
I did okay.
Yeah, I'd say you did okay. I say this a lot, but I do love how you take a strong prediction and then just make it a next to impossible prediction to come true.
Because there's absolutely no consequences for me going out on a limb. If I were to be publicly flogged, or if we actually had listeners who cared about the show and came after me, then it might be different.
Yeah, well.
So time to make our 2026 predictions?
Well, why don't we let's go ahead and take a quick break.
Okay.
And then we'll come back with that.
Doesn't pay to make predictions, but we'll make them anyway. 'Cause it is prediction day.
All right, we're back, and now is the time where we make our bold predictions for 2026. David, why don't you start us off?
Okay, I'm going to do my normal thing, but I don't want it to count against one of my three.
Okay.
I'm going to say that right now. So I'm going to go my Naismith picks first.
All right.
We're early. I mean, so much can happen. So I'm thinking, I'm probably going out on a big limb here. I'm going to start with the men's player of the year, and as much as I hate to go back-to-back Duke, I'm going Cameron Boozer. Great story. Of course, the son of a former NBA and Duke star, Carlos Boozer. And I think that team with John Shire at the helm will continue to stay in the top and vie for a national title. So I'm going there, and he's just been very impressive. On the women's side, I think UConn's going to end up being the strongest team again, and I'm going to go with their best player, who was Sarah Strong. So I'm kind of going young on the player of the year side, but I think that's becoming more and more normal. On the men's coach side, I think is a very tough one. I'm going to go with Arizona's Tommy Lloyd.
Okay.
I think this is the year he's done it. He's won a lot of awards from a conference level and so forth, and the team is looking very, very strong this year. And so, given that he maybe hasn't gotten as much consideration for the top spot before, I think this is the year. And on the women's side, listen, it could always go to Gino. It could always go to Dawn. I'm going to go with Vic Schaefer from Texas.
I am a huge Vic Schaefer fan.
Yeah.
Just an outstanding person.
Because I'm assuming that Eric Oberman does at least listen to the audio version of this. I'm going to assure him that Tim is not making any faces at me. He's not giving me any signals. He's not doing anything untoward to drag the Naismith Awards and the Atlanta Tip-Off Club into any sort of ill regard.
Yeah. The one thing I will say is, unlike last year, this year, I think all of our awards are going to be very competitive. And on the coaching side, they typically are very close. On the player side last year, Juju Watkins and Cooper Flagg were notwithstanding your prediction, were the favorites from very early in the season. This year, I mean, there's a lot of basketball still to be played, but players of the year, very much up in the air. Coaches of the year are very much up in the air. And then who's going to make the big dance in the Final Fours is still up in the air right now.
When does the first watch list come out?
Well, the first watch list came out at the beginning of the season, 50 players on the men's side, 50 players on the women's side. That'll be cut down in February, and so we'll talk about that at that time.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Your number one prediction.
Yeah, my first prediction is the WNBA will not lose any games to this labor situation. And the reason I say that, and I was going back and forth over the holidays, I was coming up with my list. And the reason I'm saying that is because now the discussions that are being had aren't between somebody sitting on the North Pole and somebody sitting in the South Pole and trying to come together. They're at least on the same continent when it comes to these conversations. So I do think that cooler heads will prevail and they will come to an agreement. This isn't, for me especially, it's not really going out on a limb because the season's not scheduled to start until the second quarter.
Yeah, I had that on my list. I'm not going to do it. I think I have a backup.
Okay.
I agree with that. I do think that because it's later this week, actually, that the current deadline is in place. My guess had been that for show from the players, they may take a strike position, so there's a couple days, but that they also were not going to miss any games. At least based on the most recent quotes I've seen with Unrivaled League starting from Nafisa Collier, who is not playing this year due to injury in Unrivaled. She seems much more diplomatic than she has been, and that even though you're right, they're still far apart, correct. They're on the same page and they're talking about similar issues. I do think one of the interesting stories will be is what ends up happening to Project B. They have some signings, but nothing that seems overly drastic at this point. But they're paying these super high salaries to try to sway some people over to play, not playing at the same season.
Almost like the LIV Golf model.
Very interesting. All right, good one. Okay, my next is that the NBA will will drop a tiny bit of penalty to the Clippers and Ballmer, but it won't be all that significant. They will find that they didn't circumvent, but they manipulated. This is the way I'm kind of seeing it, that there was some manipulation of salary cap, but Ballmer will be given enough plausible deniability that the penalty won't be all that strong, probably a significant fine. I think the max for this is $7.5 million, which seems for Steve Ballmer to be pretty minor. Maybe a draft pick loss. But I think one of the big things that will come out of it are new guardrails that are in place to prevent this from happening again, and a monitoring of all deals that free agents sign on the sponsorship side and where that money is coming from and what those deals are. And that's something we've talked about on this show.
So let me ask you, before I give my next prediction, do you agree with that rationale that you just laid out? Okay.
My point being is if they find any culpability to the point that they would penalize, that culpability seems very, very major and completely at odds with the nature of ownership in a league based on the agreements they have. And I'm not saying they're all trying to find an advantage, right? But this one seemed very serious. But my sense is that Ballmer's a very important owner. It's not a good look as they're going into expansion. My view is if they find any culpability, that the penalty should be very, very harsh, and I don't suspect that it's going to be that harsh.
Okay.
What about you?
I think what they did was egregious, but I agree with your thought. It's something that while Adam Silver won't sweep under the carpet, he will want to put an end to it, get closure, and move on for the reasons that you cited.
Yep. All right. What's next on yours?
My next one is along the same lines as my first prediction is MLB will be in a lockout or strike situation as soon as the current collective bargaining agreement expires on December 3rd. So a little bit less than 11 months from now, but every indication seems to be pointing in that direction.
Yeah, I would agree, even though there's so many positives to draw on for MLB, and there's some talk about trying to open up the television negotiations early. There's good opportunities to make more money at the local level. There were some good things happening. And I think the big sticking point, it seems to me, is going to be this idea of a hard cap. And no matter how many other things that MLB would be willing to do, which I think would be solid and important, particularly raising the floor on this to benefit the rank and file players even more, that it's not going to matter because it's that hard cap at the top that's going to be something that they just don't seem to want to stand for. Coming off of a Dodgers back-to-back, and what that means is, one of the top salary producers and one that, pays that tax because of crossing the thresholds, as I say egregiously, but I don't mean it necessarily negative. They have the money to spend, they do it, and they have built a good team. So, yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting fight. I'd like to see the players agree to a hard cap, get all the other things that they want, and have the hard cap high enough where they could, live with it. But it seems as though while the union should be protecting the rank and file, it seems sometimes that the voices are the ones that are the ones making the big dollars, and that's the problem that the players will have, is that it caps what they can make.
What's next for you?
World Cup. I'm going to predict that at least one market, there will be disruption of at least one game. I'm guessing LA would be the favored place, that there will be protests to the point that disrupt. I think we can expect some degree of planned protests, or at least forecast protests, and how things are dealt with, we don't know. I'm a little worried about this, but I imagine that if things continue to go as we're seeing them go in 2026 so far this year, that we could have some interest, and the stage is just so massive that we could see some protests that get to the point where games have to be delayed, postponed.
It's like somebody took the smoldering remains of what was in the dumpster and just put more stuff in it to reignite it for 2026.
Yeah.
If you saw my notes, my prediction, I won't count this because I will give you the World Cup prediction, and that's a very good one. Mine was much more broad. If you saw my notes, it just said World Cup with an arrow and the word next to it that said cluster. But I wasn't even thinking along the same lines you are. I'm thinking that there will be some sort of diplomatic snafu that is going to prevent either a delegation or a group of fans or a player from at least one of the countries to not get here. And at that point, Gianni Infantino is going to have to go back to his dear friend and say, listen, this is not conduct becoming of a FIFA Peace Prize recipient. You need to help me out here. That's what I think is going to happen. Now, whether or not he's successful in that, I don't know. But I do think that there will be some sort of diplomatic row that comes up around World Cup. And that is incredibly unfortunate that I even have to think that way. This is one case where I sincerely hope that my prediction is wrong.
I hope I'm wrong too, and that nothing changes. And I think that if there are protests, and it would be very natural for people to protest around at this time, that everything is peaceful and on the up and up,
right? Which
will make everything difficult, because these games, including those games in LA, it just seems like that's the market, because it's such a hotbed anyway, particularly a hotbed for immigration issues.
Right.
Okay, what else do you have?
My next one is that, and I'm doubling down again, there will be a gambling scandal this year, and this is where I go one extra step, specifically related to a prediction market.
Unlike any we've ever seen before. I love this one.
Blackhawks were the first team. They signed a deal with 𝘢𝘁. Polygon is the other one. Is that the name of it?
Polymarket?
Polymarket, yeah, Polymarket. I think Polygon is a blockchain. Anyway.
Well, it's shape, but
yes. If you want to go back to elementary school,
multi-sided shape.
Yes, with no two sides being equal.
Listeners, you don't get this on other sports biz shows. Let's just, I don't care if it's coming out of a university. You don't get this stuff.
No, Geometry 101. No, but I do think there will be all you have to do is look, is that there was the prediction market went wild on oil futures the day before we rendered or took Maduro and his wife into custody and brought them to the United States. So it is just ripe for being manipulated. And I think I won't go so far as to say it will make the deal with Rozier and Chauncey Billups look small. And I think you're seeing teams and leagues being a lot more cautious about this than they are with sports books.
Well, they're being cautious, but like with sports books, when the NHL said basically endorsed the concept, all the teams are going to. It's hard not to take the money when other teams are taking the money. I'm very worried about this. I love this. I like this prediction. There's a reason I want to talk to the head of the Gaming Association, because they are urging the leagues not to push forward with the prediction markets. But man, they're everywhere now. Like we talked about it seems like a couple weeks ago, about the broadcast being taken over by the betting stuff. You see the news sites now cutting deals, and everything's a prediction market now. And as you've said many times, the more these situations are in place, the easier it becomes to manipulate and for bad players, bad actors to want to get involved in that from a money standpoint. I'm very, very concerned about that. So I think that's a reasonable one as well. The last one I wanted to make was, and we talked about it already, so it's not going to be a surprise, and I don't think it's that big of a thing, but that when it comes to golf, there will be no merger, and the reason there will be no merger is there's no reason to have a merger. There's nothing really necessarily to merge. I think, as I had always thought before, that if there was a merger, the merger was that LIV remains as the team-based operation within the tour, but with TGL kicking off again and the tour getting very much behind that, and a lot of very exciting players playing in that series, and then especially as players drop out, players the caliber of Brooks Koepka and possibly DeChambeau. The reason to merge just isn't there. So I'm saying nothing happens in golf, and we'll see if at the end of the year what LIV is.
Nothing happens in golf. I think you expressed the sentiments of many non-golf fans in this country.
I do have a couple other things that, as terms of our normal close, as far as, what I'm looking for. But I do need to I have to make a big shout out here. And this is hard for me to do, but I'm going to do it. And this is a shout out to Tom Brady. Because I've criticized Tom Brady. And
what?
I had suspected that he would be horrible at commentating. I said as much. We never denied his greatness as a player and his mind for the position and the game. And I'll say this, and I was fortunate because he called a series of Bears games late in the season, including the 2 Packers games, the one that the Bears lost at Lambeau, which was an amazing game, and the one that they won at Soldier Field, which was an amazing game. Tom Brady is doing what Romo did his first year. The level of enthusiasm and fun he brings to it is quite captivating. I have to say, he and Kevin Burkhardt have really come together nicely. It's fun to see someone that played for as long as he did, won as much as he did, be able to remove himself from the playing days and get whatever it was that sparked him to be as great as he was at the game, reignited into being a broadcaster. And that's just, it's refreshing to listen to. I sound like I'm turning into a classic Tom Brady fanboy here, which I'm not, but I got to give him his due.
Well, there's very few announcers who I just can't stand. So I wouldn't gush over anybody. I wouldn't kill anybody unless they were really terrible. I agree with you. I think Tom Brady does a very good job. What I'm very interested to see is if what he does in helping the team he has a part ownership spot in with the Raiders. They fired Pete Carroll after 1 year. They had a horrible year. They get the number 1 pick in the draft. So let's see. Do you know who the last time they had the number 1 pick in the draft, who they chose?
That quarterback from LSU?
Yeah, Jamar Russell. One of the biggest busts in NFL history.
Well, yeah, I was going to follow up by saying that he is way better at broadcasting than he is as whatever ownership level, and he's supposed to keep a certain distance. Although Carroll said that
Jamarcus Russell, excuse me.
Jamarcus Russell, yeah.
Jamar Russell is the basketball player from Maryland. Yes.
Remember him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to give that shout out, and I think it's deserved. And listen, I'm very much looking forward to catching the Bears and the Packers. Third time these teams have to play this year. These rivals for the longest rivalry in the NFL. The Bears will be hosting. The Bears kind of ended the season a little rough, but still secured the number 2 seed with the Packers losing to the Eagles, so they at least get home field advantage. And we're going to obviously have to talk about this insane stadium situation that the Bears are going through, particularly given what just happened with Kansas City, but we'll save that for another show.
Well,
what about you?
Well, I want to give a shout out to Tiger Woods, who turned 50 on December 30th. He's having a huge party on January 14th. Listen, I don't know about you. Maybe we can steal
We should broadcast from there.
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking, right? So if anybody,
Rick Singer,
Mark Steinberg, Rick Singer, if you want to get us invited, get us there. But his brand, Red, is going to be the title sponsor of the event. And I think there's going to be about 300 guests there. So we didn't even have that many for my twins' first birthday, and that was double duty. I think we've touched on everything we want to touch on.
So that's it. Season 5, episode 1, 141st overall.
Wow.
We really are looking to make 2026 even better than 2025. So remember, refer us to any friends you may have that have an interest in the sports biz, and be sure to check out dpandmcgee.com to find out ways to follow us. Got the Winter Games right around the corner. FIFA World Cup on U.S. soil here before we know it. So this is a massive year in the sports biz. And Tim and I, we are very grateful to be able to share our perspectives with you, weird as they may seem sometimes anyway.
Well,
so until next time, I'm DP, he's McGhee, and we'll talk soon.
Next to you.